listening to Europe's #1 pro wrestling podcast.
Set no substitutes.
Bringing you the best in pro wrestling interviews, news, and opinions with Mr. Stevie Knight.
Welcome then to the It's Nighttime Wrestling Podcast, the best in British wrestling, old and new. This is a fantastic interview that I did a couple of years ago with a real legend of British wrestling, Danny Boy Collins. You can really hear the passion that he's got for wrestling when you listen to this. Some absolutely brilliant stories about injuries that he's had when he's literally had to be carried to the car to get to shows, and the guys have had to help him out of the car when he's got to the show. And then managed to wrestle on the night as well. So absolutely awesome stories about Japan. One of my favourite interviews that I did. So do enjoy this one. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. We're going to be running this every single week from now on. We've got some brilliant guests lined up, including the absolutely brilliant Johnny Kidd, James Mason, Phil Powers is going to be coming on the podcast as well. Just some absolutely brilliant guests. So do make sure you subscribe. Also, check us out on Facebook, Seconds Away It's Nighttime on there, and on Twitter, Night It's Time on Twitter. So enjoy this one. It's a couple of years old, but everything holds up. So enjoy Danny Boy Collins. We start asking Danny how he got involved in the wrestling business.
By accident, I guess. I was taken along, like a lot of kids are, to a wrestling event by my parents and by a mad uncle I had. And the very first time I went to it was in Yate near Bristol, and I just fell in love with it. Absolutely fell in love with it. I knew that night that was what I wanted to do, and nothing was going to change my mind on that, you know. And from that moment, I was just driven, and as soon as I could, I joined an amateur wrestling club. It was about when I was 9. Broke my collarbone the first night. Didn't care less. Just, got it repaired and went back as soon as I could. And I did that sort of 2 nights a week. And then when I was about 13, I started training for the pro ring 2 nights a week. So, even at that age, I was traveling 4 nights a week just to do the profession I wanted to do.
So you started this, and I know you posted a story recently about you start with the professional game. So you was going to school, and literally the day you finished school, you was off doing professional, wasn't you? Tell us that story.
Yeah, I because of the time of my birthday, I finished school when I was 15. And like I said earlier, I knew what I wanted to do, So I left school on the Friday and in my hometown in Bristol. Said goodbye to my parents on the Monday and left to move to Leeds. And that's where I stayed, for most of my life. I never went back. I just went back home to see my parents. But my life from then on was just totally changed. I was living my life on the road. God, it was hard. It was really, really hard. And I know old guys say that, and I can hear myself saying it. And I know I know I sound like an old bastard, but it really was hard, Steve. And you know it as well as I do. It was a real tough game to get into. This is no bullshit. You got your head kicked in every night. I got beat unrecognisable and left at shows, made to make my own way home. And some weeks I would spend my time in Brixton. I was still only 15 years old. 2 weeks in Brixton, 2 weeks in Leeds. Stayed in a cold, damp, grotty bedsit. Horrible place to be, especially in the 80s. Wasn't the greatest place. And it was really tough, and it was hard to stay focused some days. I think if I didn't have that real pure grit determination, it could have been quite easy for me to throw the towel in. And I guess in some ways that's what some of the older pros wanted, They wanted to see if you had what it took. And I just did what I did, patched myself up and got back there the next night and took it again.
Now, it was a real hard job to get into. I mean, I found it difficult to get into, and I'm a good 12 years, after you. Mm. How did you manage to get into the job? I'm assuming, did you start with Max Crabtree?
Yeah, I did. I started, I had my very first professional match in my hometown in Bristol. And like I said, I was 15 years old. I was terrified. There was 2,000 people in. It was my home crowd. And I had to perform, there was big expectations set on me. And I went in there and I did 6 rounds with a guy called Adrian Finch. Luckily, the crowd loved me. And it was sort of, from there on, really, my career just went on and on. And I was very fortunate, it was in the TV days then. And if you like, I was the youngster of the team. You know, they were all old guys, been in the business a long, long time, and I was a little 16-year-old baby-faced boy. I'm not like that anymore, by the way, but you know, in those days it was I had it made really, and I went from strength to strength.
You did. You started on World of Sport, and you was prominently featured on there a lot, wasn't you? You was very lucky to kind of get on there more or less straight away after you start. How long was it before you appeared on TV?
It wasn't
after you'd started in the job.
Yeah, it wasn't long at all, Steve. I think it was about 6 months. My first match was in Leeds Town Hall with Jimmy Breaks, and it was just surreal, you know, because like we were talking about earlier, you really have to imagine this scenario. I was in school one moment, and then the next moment I was in this man's world, you know, and it was men's men. And I had all this stuff going on, you know. I had TV shows and interviews and radio interviews, and I was absolutely terrified, you know. I just had no experience of this, you know, and I really had to man up pretty quick. So yeah, that was the first match, about 6 months, I guess, after I'd been in the business.
And it's not just in the ring. I can probably relate to you a little bit here, because it's not just in the ring, is it? It's you're thrown into this land of men, aren't you? I remember being thrown into the back of the van with 4 guys, and you know the women come into it, don't they? And they want you to go out and pull these women. And I'd had no experience with women at all. I don't know about you at this stage, but it was frightening to me, absolutely frightening. It was like you'd been thrown into a completely different world.
Yeah, it literally was. You know, you were just fed to the lions, weren't you? You know, it was like I said, you really had to man up, and you had to man up quick. And you had to prove yourself, you know. You had to prove that you could take what they were going to give you, and you know, it was tough to do that. You know, it was a real sort of lonesome period, if you like, because all the time you just felt isolated from the guys. You know, you weren't allowed in the change rooms. You had to get changed in the hallway, and you know, there was this total alienation. And they would call it the 7-year apprenticeship, you know. They would make you do that for 7 years, you know, just to prove you really wanted to be in the business. And, you know, it's just not like that anymore. Things have changed. But to be perfectly honest, Steve, I'm glad it was that way. You know, it did make me man up. And I can remember guys like Finlay, after about 7 or 8 years, they really took me in and helped me. And they said, you know, we had so much respect for you because we'd beat the living shit out of you every night, you know, and you came back for more the next night. And he said, that's what it takes to make it in this business, you know. And he said, you need never fear another man in your life. He said, you are more of a man than I ever thought you'd turn out to be. You know, I'll never forget that.
Yeah. Do you think, because I mean, I had my fair share of beatings, you'll have had hundreds of beatings, and a lot of people I've spoken to have had a lot of beatings, and it's not just inside the ring, it's mental outside the ring, isn't it, as well, a lot of mental beatings. Do you think there's an element where you're being taught respect in the ring? Do you think also there's a part where it may go into bullying anywhere, Danny?
No, it's a fine line, isn't it? You know, and I don't ever think I was bullied. You know, I really don't think that. And if I'm really honest, Steve, I wouldn't have had it any other way. You know, I think that did me the power of good. And it's even now I have my feet firmly planted on the ground. You know, I never think I'm anything more than I am. I think I'm extremely lucky to have had the breaks I had. But having said that, I worked my ass off for them. You know, I had to work for those breaks. But those guys taught you a lot of respect. You know, and I've never ever lost that. You know, I still respect those guys today. Murphy, Finlay, Marty Jones, all them old-timers, you know. I still respect the hell out of them today. I've never, ever lost that. And,
absolutely.
And I think that's a great thing to have. And it definitely keeps you humble, you know.
Yeah. Now, speaking of breaks, that's the guy you really started with, isn't it, on TV? Talk about Jim Breaks. He's kind of a figure that has mesmerises a lot of people. How did he get on with Jim Breaks?
Jim is a legend, isn't he? You know, let's have it right. And it's amazing, really, because when people think of British wrestling, they think of all the giants in the business, you know, Big Daddy, Giant Haystacks. But if you actually look back, you know, most of the top names and the top guys in the business around that time were middleweights, you know, or light heavyweights. Jimmy Breaks, Mick McManus, you know, those sort of guys. Les Kellett, you know, Jackie Pallo, all those guys, they were all middleweights, welterweights. And Jimmy, for me, was just fantastic. You know, what he did, his timing was great. Real professional, and he had the crowd eating out of his hand, you know. And wrestling with Jimmy was easy for me and it was hard for me, you know, in two ways. It was hard because, again, Jimmy could be a tough opponent. He was a great amateur, and he really knew his stuff in the ring. But it was also easy for me because you've got the guy that everybody loves to hate, Jimmy Briggs, a bad guy, you know, and the jumping up and down thing, and you've also got me as a 15, 16-year-old, babyface looking, you know, clean-shaven guy. It was dead easy for me, really, you know, to get the fans on my side. I really didn't have to do anything. I literally just had to leave that to Jimmy. He was a fantastic pro, and he did what he did.
Yeah, you was the last guy. A lot of the guys I used to speak to when I started, like with Marty and Drew, used to say to me, you was the last guy that Max really pushed on the TV before the TV went off. Why do you think that was?
I think Max was a very clever man, you know, and I would never say anything against Max. I've never had a wrong word to say about him. I like the bloke. And not purely because he gave me a push on TV, purely because when people talk about promoters, for me there are promoters and there are people who run shows. And the name itself, promoter, you know, gives you the clue. What he's actually doing is taking somebody who was really unknown, you know, just a schoolboy in Bristol, totally unknown to anybody, and doing exactly what it says on the tin, promoting him, you know. And that's exactly what Max did. Max was a promoter, you know, and he would take anybody and make them a household name overnight. You know, he knew exactly how to do it, and you know, you've seen so many examples coming through Dale Martins, you know, of good promotion, you know, good promoting, and Max is a prime example of that. He absolutely knew his stuff, and probably still does today. You know, he knew how to make something of somebody.
You were a frequent tag partner of Big Daddy back in the day. What did you think to being the guy that did all the work in the ring for Daddy to come in and take the glory?
I didn't really care too much, Steve, to be honest with you. It was a good variation for me, and it was, you know, it was a good way for me to get my name across in those days. Pretty much anybody who was Daddy's tag partner had a good, decent following, you know, and was well known. It also meant I got to work with most of the top guys, you know, the likes of Giant Haystacks and Finlay and stuff were in the tags regularly. So yeah, I quite enjoyed it, to be honest with you. It was always a packed house, you know, and the places like the Royal Albert Hall in London, sell out crowds, going into the ring in front of 6,000-7,000 people who's Daddy's tag partner then. Yeah, great buzz for a young small kid.
Fantastic time to have got started in the job.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're being in the ring, obviously, like you say, with the Finlays, Roccos, and all these kind of people. Who was your favourite guy to get in the ring with? Let's not pinpoint one. Who were some of your favourite guys to get in the ring with at that point? Obviously, Finlays and Roccos are names that people live on. Who were some of the names that maybe people have forgotten about now?
Oh, God, I enjoyed most of the guys then because all those guys in their heyday, you know, could wrestle. They'd all been taught properly. If I was going to pick some specifics, there were some great guys like Mal Sanders, Steve Gray. Steve was always great for doing wrestling matches with. Like you mentioned, Finlay, Skull Murphy. Loved working with Owen Hart. Owen Hart was an absolute legend for me and one of the biggest losses in the business, you know. I absolutely love that guy. I could talk to you all night about favourite opponents. God, I've just had so many, Steve. It would just be an endless list, to be honest with you. All the guys back in their day then were taught properly, like I said. They knew the business inside out. They could do 6 rounds with a chair and get a match out of them, you know. Yeah.
Do you think at any point the world of sport there was, and I'm not going to disagree with you at all, you know, there was some, like everybody you just named, fantastic talent. If you look back on some of it, it wasn't all roses, was it? There was some rose-tinted things. There was not everybody on there was brilliant, was there?
Well, it's like anything you get in life. You always get your bill fillers, don't you? You know, you get top of the bills, you get your follow-up matches, and you always get a bottom of the bill, if you like. Yeah, I mean, you always get that through any sport and any business, but there's always been middle-of-the-road workers and what I would call low-quality workers, you know, just budget workers. And it's funny, isn't it, because some people can be in this business 1 year and be fantastic. Some people can be in it 30 years and be absolute shit.
Yes,
you know?
very true.
That is absolutely true, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
I've worked with guys that have only been in the business a year and they're absolute dream, you know, they know the business, they've studied it, they're really dedicated and they're brilliant. I'll tell you a good example of that, Kid McCoy, fantastic.
Yes.
Not been in the business a year, absolutely brilliant, you know. Could get a great match with him.
I was talking to Regal yesterday, actually. He was telling me that he trained in Marty's gym in '85 with him.
Did he? Yeah. Yeah.
And he was saying, he was absolutely fantastic from the get-go.
Yeah.
So, absolutely, another name that... Yeah, another name that's unfortunately, finished up. It's a shame there wasn't, the work for these people to carry on, because so much to probably teach at this point in time for those guys. It is a shame. Right. So now the next one, you had a kidney removed, didn't you? Around what year did you have this kidney removed?
I was 18, so would have been about 85, 86.
Did this curtail your career at any point for a period of time?
I had about 6 months off after the operation. Like I've been told many times, they told me I'd never wrestle again. They said that was the end of my career. And I saw an expression the other day, and it fitted me perfectly. If you want me to do something, tell me I can't do it. That's the perfect way of getting me to do stuff. When somebody says you can't do something, guess what? I'm going to do that just to piss you off and prove you wrong. Nobody was ever going to tell me I wasn't going to be able to wrestle again, ever. And that's the way it was, and within 6 months I was back in the ring, and I've had numerous injuries like that where they've said, you'll never wrestle again, and I was just that headstrong, and wrestling was all I ever wanted to do, and if it meant carrying me out in a box, then carry me out in a box, because that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, sounds like obviously you've certainly had the dedication, which is lacking. Lacking in a lot of people.
Nobody whatsoever,
Now, when did you first start going off to different places? I remember you telling me you went off to Spain very early on, didn't you?
Yeah. Oh God, that was a hell of a trip. We did 2 or 3 nights, I think, in was North Spain. Can't remember where it was. It was Santander or somewhere like that. And I think it was a trip, me and Ray Steele and Talio Kay and somebody else. There was only 4 guys, and it was in northern Spain, and it was a real hellhole. It was horrible. We stayed at some YMCA place. It was full of cockroaches. It was absolutely gross. And for people listening that think wrestlers have a fantastic lifestyle and we stay in luxury spas and stuff like that, God, you need to come on a road trip with us sometime.
Where are some of the countries you've been to? Because this is a big part of your career, isn't it? You've done a lot in Germany and abroad, and I think this is where you've worked with a lot of the people, a lot of names that have gone on to make worldwide success. So where are some of the countries you've been to around Europe?
Europe, Switzerland, Denmark, Norway, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Belgium. Yeah, pretty much done most of them. I loved them, I was involved in the German tournaments a lot, which for me really was a big thing, because the German tournaments, they were all big guys. Otto and Peter Williams had a big thing about big guys, and if you weren't 6'8" and 28 stone of muscle, you weren't going to get there, And this is what I say to young guys now, don't ever let your size put you off of your capabilities, and where you're likely to get, because I got into the German tournaments purely because I could work, purely because I could wrestle. And I got there purely on my ability. It was nothing to do with my size, because obviously I'm not the biggest guy in the world, but I could do the business, And I was fortunate, too, in a way, because I went there as Finley's tag partner.
Right.
They brought me in as Finley's tag partner, and in a way that made it a bit easier for me. Finley was more or less my size, maybe a bit bigger, but he already had instant heat on himself, so it was kind of easy because I went in as his tag partner. And yeah, we used to do 9 months of the year there, and wrestling fans maybe don't get to hear this, but we used to start in I think it was May, and we started in Graz in Austria, and then we did 14 weeks I think there in the same arena, same fans every night. And then we went to Vienna from there. We did 12 weeks in Vienna, same arena, same place every night, same fans. From there we drove to Hanover, and we wrestled on the Schützenplatz there in a tent. I think that was 12 or 14 weeks. Same arena, like I say, same fans. And then we went through to Bremen, and we worked right through to Christmas Eve. So we did almost 9 months there, and drove home Christmas Eve. And we've been on the piss every night. We've gone out, had takeaways, had partied for 9 months. And I think I came home with about 30 grand in my back pocket.
It's like the dream job, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny, really, Steve, because I was speaking to somebody the other day on a show, and they were talking about, can you talk to me a little bit about how the business has changed? And we almost got into an argument because, because obviously he was a younger kid, he hadn't seen what it was like years ago, and he was saying, well, I can't see how the business can have changed that much. And I said, changed? I said, I used to have a 3-bedroom detached house in the country, a lovely setting with an acre and a half of garden, a Mercedes, a BMW on the drive, 2 kids at private school, and I did that on my wrestling wage, working 7 nights a week. I said, what can you do now on your wrestling wage? And how often are you working?
Yeah, probably buy the takeaway.
And the guy was just like, yeah, okay, got it, And I dug an old date sheet out the other day because I've moved recently to Lincolnshire. And I was going through some old boxes, and I was just getting rid of some rubbish. And I come across some date sheets from about 1986 or 7, I think it was, for September, because the promoter used to send you date sheets in advance of where you were going to be. And that date sheet for September had 37 jobs on it. 37 jobs.
Yeah.
30 days of September, right? But you can see from there, he was doing 7 doubles that month. Yeah. Which is incredible, 37 jobs. I doubt most guys get to do that now in a year.
In a year, absolutely.
Which really is a really sad reflection, on how the business has changed.
And I understand.
Go on, Steve.
No, I'm just saying, and you'll speak to these guys now, and if you try and mention this to them, they think you're an old bastard. Yeah. This is exactly. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And I can hear myself saying it, and I'm thinking, why am I saying this? Because I know he's just looking at me vacantly, as if to say, "Shut up, you silly old bastard,"
Exactly.
I know he's thinking that, but I have to tell him because that's the way it was.
Yeah, and they don't understand that. They think that I won't mention the name, but I had a disagreement with a chap on Twitter this week. His update on his Twitter was something about for the old guys we've left behind, we are moving forward, and it was kind of like I just put a response of something like, without the guys who you left behind, you wouldn't be doing this job. Yeah. And it was kind of just a kick in the teeth for the guys that was doing this job when there was 30 people when I was doing it in Liverpool that used to have 1,000 people in there.
Yeah, that kind of comes back to that respect thing that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And you can talk about how the business has changed. And I was talking to this guy, and I said, well, what was the best house you wrestled in front of? And he said, we had a great crowd the other week. We had 400 people in. I said, 400? Me and Jimmy Brake sold out the Royal Albert Hall.
Yeah.
8,000 people. What are you talking about? You had a good house, 300 or 400 people. That's a shit house.
Yeah.
That's a crap house. We never used to go out and see what the house was like, see if there was many people in. We knew it was full. We didn't have to say, is it a good house?
Yeah.
We never looked at
Listen
that.
to us, we sound like right old bastards now, don't we?
I guess
to these
young kids, I guess we are, Steve. But...
I was going to say, don't listen to that podcast, there's 2 right old bastards on there.
Who cares? Maybe there's older bastards that want to listen to it.
Exactly, we'll be all right. There'll be some 75-year-olds who I remember watching him at Colston Hall.
Exactly. I always think if we're still around, our fans are still around,
That's true, that is true. That is true. Yeah. So while you was off in Germany and things, obviously there'd have been a lot of the Americans that went on to do very well in America a little bit later on. Would this have been the time when Benoit and these kind of guys were over in Germany?
Yeah, they were, yeah. Most of most of the guys came to the UK and Europe to learn their business, and it's strange because I met Chris Benoit when we were doing a TV show in France, and he came up to me and he was just a young kid and I wasn't a lot older, and he came over to me and he said, Danny Collins, it's really nice to meet you. Dynamite Kid said to introduce myself to you because he said you'd look after me. Like I was some kind of babysitter, And but yeah, I've had the good fortune to work with most of those guys, And
you did a terrible job, Danny.
Yeah, somebody had to do it. Fancy Dynamite giving him to me to look after, Dynamite knew what he was doing, didn't they?
Yeah, clearly, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no, I've been really fortunate to work with a lot of the top guys, and it's been an absolute privilege. Most of them are down to earth, nice guys. No edges on them, no airs or graces, just down to earth, normal guys.
Was you one for ribs, Danny? Did you pull ribs on other people?
Yeah, occasionally. We had mainly with guys that I knew well. The likes of Finlay and Haystacks and stuff like that. I think you bond some real good friendships in this business, and you tend to bond friendships with certain people, and they're lifetime friendships. I've got a handful of guys that I would call absolute best buddies, where I could phone them up and just turn up on the doorstep, you know. And I could name a few. I've got Finlay, I've got Skull Murphy, Robbie Brookside, those sort of guys. You know, they're the sort of guys that'll be with you for a lifetime. Darren Walsh. And I've got a handful that I could just rely on 100%. And you've got other guys which are just purely business associates, if you like. You know, you get to see them every so often. You respect them because they're great pros, but they're not part of your life like some guys are, you know.
Yeah. One of the guys that you worked with a lot was Lance Storm, who came over to Germany. He would say that Finlay was the best wrestler of all time. Where would you agree with that?
It's a real close call for me, you know, between Finlay and Dynamite Kid.
Right.
They are my top two, and I really, really can't separate the two. I think when you look at the two of them and the timing and what they do and how they do it and when they do it, you know, because that's the important thing, isn't it? It's not just what you do in the ring. It's about timing. You know, you can be the greatest pro in the world and know all the moves, but you know, if you don't have the ability to put all those things together, then you're in trouble. You know, you never make those top ranks. I always say that our business comes down to three things: presentation, ability, and timing. You know, and if you've got those three things, if you've got the presentation, i.e. you look the part, you've got a great entrance, you're in good shape, you've got the ability to do what you need to do in the ring, but also you've got the timing, you know, and if you've got those three things, then that's what makes a good pro, and Dynamite Kid and Finlay had both those things. And also when you look at Dynamite Kid years back, he was doing all that stuff now that the younger kids, if you like, if we're going to be old farts, the younger kids are doing now, but they think they're the first ones that did it. You look at
30 years ago.
Look at Dynamite 30, 40 years ago. He was doing headbeds off the corner outside down onto the concrete.
How personable with Dynamite have you been outside of the ring, Danny?
Oh, Dynamite, I love the guy. I absolutely love the guy. If I was gay, I would marry him tomorrow. I think he's fucking amazing. Excuse my language. He's just such a character, honestly. You have to be on a tour with him to get to know him. Talk about ribs. Oh, my God. That guy could rib people forever, you know, and just never give up. We had one of the Americans out in Ireland who actually ended up in the hospital. Dynamite had ripped him so badly. He had a dose of the shits, and Dynamite kept giving him chewing gum, telling him it was special chewing gum to stop him getting the shits, and it was actually laxative chewing gum, you know. And then he'd give him laxative chocolates, and he ended up in the hospital so bad, you know. We really thought he was going to die at one point. And I can tell you a million stories about Dynamite, mate. He's a legend. He said to me one night, I was in a pub in Wigan, and he said the cops came in to arrest me. He said I pissed off out the back door, went around the front and pushed their motorbikes down in the river and legged it. The guy's just a legend. He's brilliant. And I had the privilege to wrestle him in his later days, you know, after he had his major injury. And you know what? He was still a fantastic pro then, even with that injury.
Yeah.
Can't say enough about Dynamite, highly enough. I think he's a great guy inside and outside the ring. Love him.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
He's certainly. I spoke to Marty about him. It was brilliant to talk to about, because Marty obviously met him when he was really young.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So it was, you know, it was real nice to get. Obviously, you've seen him in his later days and met him, and Marty knew him in his. And I think Dynamite holds a lot of mystery to a lot of people, because he's got this reputation of either being a real arsehole or being the greatest wrestler of all time. So I like to try and.
Tommy was a hard guy, you know. People were afraid of Tommy. He had a hell of a reputation, and he could wrestle and he could fight, you know.
Yeah.
And he did both on a regular occasions, you know. He could wrestle and he could fight, and he had as many fights, I think, outside the ring as he did in the ring. He was a real handful, you know, and that stayed with him right to the end. He was like that even when I knew him right at the very end of his career. He was just the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Owen Hart, Danny.
Ah, right.
You knew him well. You wrestled him quite a lot.
Legend.
Talk about Owen.
Yeah, legend. Absolutely lovely guy, mate. Absolutely lovely. Most tragic news I think I've ever heard in this business was, you know, Owen's accident. Just couldn't believe it. I'd been wrestling with Owen not that long before that in Bath, and he was telling me about what was going on back home. And we used to train together, you see, in Leeds. We went to a gym together, Owen and I, because we were staying with the promoters there, Wisco and Green, and we used to train at a local gym. I can tell you a real funny story about Owen, because, as you know, he was brought up in a fantastic family of pros. And we were training at a gym in Leeds that was owned by two rugby players. played high up, played for England. And they were taking the mickey, talking about wrestling and what it was and what it wasn't, and how they thought it was this and it was fake and blah, blah, blah. And Owen said, oh, right, okay, yeah. He said, do you wrestle? You guys, can you wrestle? And they said, no, we're rugby players, our game's real and blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, okay. He said, well, listen, why at the end of the day today, why don't we clear some room in the gym, and we'll have a little pool round, have a little tug-about. So the two guys laughed and sort of said, yeah, okay. So sure enough, at the end of the day, Owen and I cleared some weights out of the way, got the mats ready. One of the guys came on the mats. Owen said, what are you doing? He said, well, we're having this pull-about you talked about. He said, no, I was talking about both of you coming on at the same time. Owen got both of them on the mat and made them cry like babies within minutes. They were crying and screaming, let me go, let me go. Owen just ripped them apart, absolutely ripped them apart, And they never said anything again after that. They had the utmost respect for Owen, And I did too. He was just the nicest guy you could meet, inside and outside the ring. Unassuming. Mate, I could talk to you for an hour about how nice Owen was. I genuinely loved the bloke. Great bloke.
I think when someone dies, nobody says a bad word about anybody, but I think it was absolutely genuine with Owen, wasn't it? I don't think there was anyone that said a bad word.
Yeah.
And I think that match with, one of your favourite matches, the match with Bath, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's on YouTube somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, it is,
Yeah, well worth. So, when did you see the influence of the American wrestling start seeping in on the British scene?
I can tell you almost exactly when it happened. I was there the night the business changed for me in England. We were working a WWE show in Birmingham. There was a few of the English guys on. I think me, Dave Taylor, Finlay, and Rocco, and a few of the other guys. And there was Brian Dixon and Oric came along, and I like both those fellas. I'm not going to say anything bad about them because I genuinely do like them both. And I've had some of the best times in the business and my life with Oric Williams. Fantastic bloke. But the business changed that night. The two of them were there and they saw the spectacle of it all. The fact that the houses were packed and the multi-million-dollar lighting rigs and just a massive presentation of the whole show. And I think they, and perhaps us to a certain degree, were impressed by that, And shortly after that, everything changed, Everything sort of went that way, sort of American style, and lights and smoke machines, and false entrances and stages and stuff, and that was about the time everything changed. And if I had to put a date on that, it was probably sort of early 90s, mid-90s, around about then. Yeah, but I was there, I saw the look in their eyes, and I knew things were going to change, and they did.
Brian Dixon, like you say, I've got nothing to say bad against Brian. I did a lot of work for Brian, and he was always absolutely spot on with me. And if you look at the guys that have started with Brian, that have come over for Brian, I think half the WWE roster at some point have been over and worked for Brian. Yeah. Who are some of the Americans that Brian has had over who you've worked with that has gone on to success?
Oh, gosh, he's had so many over, haven't they? I've been dropped on my head so many times, Stephen. My memory is shocking. You can name me practically anybody that's been through WWE ranks that have been here, and I've wrestled them, Yeah. The amount of guys, like I said earlier, that used to come to England just purely to learn the business. I mean, even in those days, New Japan was sending guys over to learn the business here, and then they would go back, the likes of Liger, and Tiger Mask, people like that. They would learn the business here and go back to Japan, absolutely brilliant pros, and that's how they made the name, and that's exactly what the American guys did too, and that's still happening to a degree, in the ring now. Guys are coming over from the States to learn the business here. They're touring around England, doing the shows here, and going back home with a lot of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's still the place to learn, isn't it? It
absolutely is, and it's this bizarre thing really, because all the young guys that are breaking in the business now that I speak to, they all want to be like the Americans. And want to imitate the Americans.
Who are they going to learn from now? That's the problem.
But the really bizarre flip side to that coin? Every guy I've ever wrestled in the world, all over the world, want to learn the British style.
Yeah.
That is absolutely
true. Who's going to teach them?
My heart and say everybody I've worked with has admired the British style and said that British wrestling is the best. So why are we imitating other people? And the other proof of that point? There's two countries in the world that have never copied the American style. Japan and Mexico, and their business is still booming today.
An excellent point.
To put it in there.
Yeah,
Two
absolutely.
countries that had never done American-style wrestling. Both countries are still booming.
Absolutely, yeah. Speaking of Japan, this is about when we first met, literally. I remember the first time we met, we was in the changing room in Hull Beach, and I was petrified of you. But you did,
full
because...
circle, hasn't it? I was that petrified one.
Exactly, because this is exactly what you say. The respect was there. You know, it was kind of a. I was saying to Marty, I would sit there in the changing rooms, and there'd be a couple of guys my age, and we'd sit there and we'd be talking away. And you know, admittedly, I would never admit this to the guys at your point in your career at that time, but we'd be talking about WWF probably at the time. And then the car would pull up with you and Marty and Skull. Maybe Dave Taylor or somebody at the time, and we'd shut up. Yeah. That's it. We wouldn't speak, and we'd let you guys speak. I mean, and you know, I'd travel in the car with you and Drew and things, and I'd keep my gob shut, I'd keep my ears open, and I don't know if you remember this, but I'd always ask you to watch my match, and I'd say, can you ever watch my match tonight, and you know, let me know what you think. And I don't think that happens anymore. You know, I don't think people ask that anymore. And I'm going off on a complete tangent here, but I like to put this across because when was the last time anybody asked you to do that?
Well, it's strange you asked me that, Steve, because if you'd have asked me that 5 years ago, I would have agreed with you totally and said you're absolutely spot on. But right now, it's changing again in the business. And, you know, and when I go back now, because I still wrestle a fair bit, you know, and when I go to shows now and do wrestling shows, it's really bizarre because young kids are coming into the change room, shaking my hand and calling me sir, you know, and it's so nice to meet you, and I've seen you so much on the World of Sport replays and television, and it's almost going back full circle again, where the young guys that are coming in the business have a lot of respect for the older guys. You know, it's almost gone right round full circle, and it's really, really nice to see. And young kids are actually saying to me exactly the same now as you said to me then, back then days. Will you watch my match for me? Will you tell me how I can improve? And that's really, really nice to see. And the strange thing is, when you were talking earlier about how you had so much respect for the old guys, I also had respect for you. I wasn't going to tell you, but I also had respect for you at that time because I knew you had that respect, you know?
Yeah.
And in a way, I gave you respect for that because I knew what you were doing, you know? And you reminded me a bit of myself. I could see myself in you, you know? You really wanted to be in this business, and you were prepared to go to any length to, you know, to get what you wanted to get. And fair play to you. You know, how can I not have respect for you for doing that? You did exactly the same as I did. You know? You
was always very nice to me, in fairness, when the others wasn't, so that's why I always liked you.
Well, listen, I'm nice to people who are nice to me, you know, and I like to think what goes around comes around. The problem with that is some people take kindness for softness, right? And I'm not soft. I'm not soft, you know. I have a very long fuse, and people can grate on me and whine on me, but guess what? When I snap, run for your life, you know, because I have a very long fuse, but when I snap, you don't want to be around me.
So, roundabout when we first met, buddy, you had literally just got back from Japan, Michinoku Pro, I believe. Yeah. And you actually lent me a tape of this. There's a chap called Dick Togo who's recently just retired, I read. Yeah. And he does a horrendous landing on you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this, but I remember you telling me you was all alone in the changing room after this, pissing blood with blood coming out your mouth. Do you remember this?
I would never, ever forget that. This is the only time in my life I honestly thought I was going to die from an injury in the ring. What had happened during the match, we both had our heads bust open, and he couldn't see anything, and it all went horribly wrong, and he basically just came down full weight and just crushed the life out of me, and I just couldn't breathe. I just lay there, and for that moment, people talk about your life flashing in front of your eyes. It really did. You know, at that moment, I'm led on the canvas thinking, I'm thousands of miles away from home. It's the end of the tour. I'm not going to make it. You know, and it was the last night of the tour, and we were right up in the north of Japan, Morioka, somewhere like that. And everybody else had left the arena, and I was still led outside on the car park, laid on the concrete, trying to get my breath. 2 or 3 hours after the match, I literally couldn't breathe, and I didn't eat or drink anything. I thought any moment I'm going to need an operation. This is really serious. And I had 3 days left in Tokyo on my own before I got my flight back. And all I did, literally, and fans will probably be amazed when they hear stuff like this, but all I did was went back to my hotel room. I didn't eat anything. I didn't drink anything for 3 days. I just woke up, took a pill, went back to sleep, took a pill, went back to sleep, and that's all I did for 3 days. I just didn't eat or drink anything. I thought any moment this is going to be it. And eventually I made it back on the plane. But I thought something really badly serious had gone wrong, like maybe a burst spleen or something. It was really that painful. I couldn't breathe. And I'm good with pain, Steve. You know, I can remember the likes of Finlay and Scholes saying, no pain, no pain, no pain, you know, and I'm good at that. You know, I can take pain. But this pain was different, and I think you know when something's different, you know. I never ever did find out what it was, and eventually I just got better on my own. But like a true pro, when I got back to the UK, I got in my car and drove straight to Brighton on my own, and I wrestled that night. And I'd just flown 16 hours, I think, back from Japan, and I was still in agony. I got in my car and drove down to Brighton so as not to let anybody down, and wrestled that night and drove home again afterwards.
Oh, God. Yeah. Obviously, yeah. It's the things you do, isn't it? It's the things you do.
That's what we did.
Yeah.
That's what we were taught to do, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's certainly instilled in you, isn't it? But I remember you showing me that, and it was, and if I don't know if that's on YouTube or anything, but absolutely horrendous. He does kind of like, I think they call it a senton, but he literally just lands his entire weight, and he's a big guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he is, yeah.
And he lands his entire weight straight off the top. If anyone could track that down to have a look, it certainly is horrendous. Yeah. And it certainly sounded a very painful 3 days for you.
If you get to see that, you know, anybody listening, if you actually get to see that match, take a look what happens afterwards. I'm just led there. And take a look into my eyes. You can see it in my eyes, you know. I'm fucked, and I know I am, you know. And, horrible situation to be in. But, you know, you and I have both been in positions like that. Not as bad as that, maybe, but many times, you know. I can remember my wife once at the time went out and filled my car up with petrol. I was so badly injured I couldn't go and fill my own car up. She went and filled my car up, and she literally carried me to the car. I had 2 broken ribs, 2 broken ribs, 2 ruptured discs, and a dislocated thumb. She lifted me into the car, and I drove down to Southampton on my own in absolute agony. Couldn't get in or out the car. That's why she put the petrol in to get me there. And when I got the other end, the guys lifted me out the car, helped me get changed, and I went in the ring that night and wrestled because I didn't want to let the fans down, and I didn't want to let myself down. And that's not a blag. That's the actual truth. You know, in those days, I didn't want to let anybody down. Yeah. You know, and that's how you were. You just never. You were not allowed a day off for injuries. You know, unless you were in hospital, actually in hospital being operated on. You had to be at the show, and you had to turn up, and you had to wrestle. And I can still do that today, Steve. You know, if I've got a really bad injury, like I have at the moment, I had an MRI scan 3 months ago, and I was in the machine for an hour. They did lower back, middle back, you know, thoracic area, and neck. And when I came out, the woman just said, "I'm amazed you walked in here unaided." She said, "Did you actually walk in on your own?" I said, "Yeah, of course. Why?" She said, "My God," she said, "you've got so many like broken bones where they've healed in the wrong places." And she said, "I could show you so many bones where they've just been broken and not mended right." And she said, "You've got a crumbling disc in the base of your spine, one in your neck, just below the base of your neck. And she said, you've got a separated shoulder." And she went through this whole list of injuries. And she said, "I'm absolutely amazed you can walk on your own." I said, "I still wrestle." And the girl nearly fell off the chair, you know. She was just absolutely amazed. And she said, "Your pain threshold must be unbelievable." And I said, "Well, it's not that I'm some sort of superhero. I'm no more superhuman than anybody else. It's just that that's how I've always been taught. I don't know anything else. You know, I don't know how to take a day off injured, because no matter how injured I am or what injuries I'm carrying, when I get to the ring and I hear my ring music, something in me changes. You know, and I can be in absolute pain and hardly walk, but as soon as that ring music goes on, I know I'm getting paid to do a job, and I also know the fans are paying to watch me. They don't care if I'm injured. They don't want to see me have a shit match just because I'm injured. They've paid good money. They want to see Danny Boy Collins flying about. You know, I can't go in there and say, "I'm sorry if it's not very good tonight, ladies and gentlemen, my back's aching." They're not fucking interested. They've paid their money. They want to watch you fly about and do your match. And that is what defines a professional wrestler. You know, we are professional. And when we hear that ring music, something changes in us. Something changes in our psyche. We go in there and we do what we're trained to do, you know. And you'll be able to relate to that.
It's quite incredible to listen to you. That entire passage you just said could do with being uploaded to a few places, to be honest with you, because again, it's time to harp on in old man mode again, but it is so simple now to just come in and, pay. I mean, now it's literally, £5 for 4 hours wrestling training with somebody, and just get on with it. And, if you go for 4 months, the guy feels eligible to put you on a wrestling show.
Yeah.
And it's just so easy to just get involved with it. And they wonder why sometimes the guys like you or guys that have the same mentality as you sometimes have such a problem with them. And I think when you listen to what you've just said, it's completely understandable as to why, not so much a problem, but what is the word I'm looking for? Such a lack of respect for them, possibly.
It's a lack of empathy, really. I did a show not long ago, and there was a guy there that I'd seen around wrestling a little bit, and he wasn't getting changed. And I said, "Are you not wrestling tonight?" He said, "Oh no, my knee's hurting a bit." And you know what? I just wanted to slap him off the chair. Your knee's hurting a bit, and you're not wrestling. Give me a break, I'm fucking crippled. I'm going to go out there and do the best show I've ever done because those people have paid and they deserve to see me in good shape, And if I can't go out there and do my show, guess what? I'm going to retire because those people deserve better than that. And I'm not saying that purely because I think that's what people want me to say. That is the truth. I go and see a lot of opera and theatre. I'm not interested if the guy's had a bad day or if the guy's had a cold. I pay 40 quid and I want to see a really good show. I'm the punter on that night. I want to see a really good show. And it's exactly the same for our fans, If you can't put on a good show in that ring, you shouldn't be there. You're not a pro. Simple as that. Which brings me on, because you're not doing an hour with me without me talking about my wrestling training.
Don't worry, we'll do it all at the end. Don't worry, we're going to hammer that. Do not fear. Do not fear. Now, just after you'd done this Michinoku Pro, I remember travelling to a show with you, and New Japan Pro Wrestling had contacted you, and you wasn't bothered. You didn't even respond to them. And you were losing weight. You wasn't so bothered about the wrestling at this point in time. I believe you'd got a job. What happened?
Yeah, I had this thing, really. I don't really know what happened. I think for a little while, I just lost my way a little bit in the business, It was around about the time that things were starting to turn where I just wasn't enjoying the shows anymore, A lot of the characters had left the business. You weren't having the same laugh in the change rooms anymore. It just wasn't the same experience, And I got really disillusioned with the business, and for a little while I left the business, And the problem is I thought that would be it, I thought, well, it's as easy as that. You leave the business, same as you do with any other business. What I didn't realise was how deep-rooted this business was in my blood, And I always describe this business like some life-threatening illness. You've either got it or you haven't, and if you've got it for life, This business is no different than a drug addiction to me, or alcoholism, or any of those other addictions. This business is just as bad, When you know as well as I do, when you're in this business, you're always in this business. Okay, maybe like yourself now, you don't wrestle anymore. You're living out in Cyprus. I bet there isn't a day goes by when you don't think about this business. Maybe not even an hour.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You never ever get away from this business ever. And even now, if you think you may never wrestle again, guess what? Don't ever say that. Don't ever say that, because you just might. And that's the way it turned out for me. I've tried a few times to leave this business, and now, to be perfectly honest with you, Steve, I've stopped trying to leave the business. I know I have no chance of ever leaving this business behind. I absolutely love it, and I just need to come to terms with that, which I have done. I love this business, and I always will. And I'll always stand up and defend this business, because it's what I've been brought up with, is all I know.
I think you are literally the most passionate man I've ever... I'll rephrase that, Danny.
Thank you, Steve.
After the way we started about sucking you off and now talking about how passionate you are, I think we should completely rephrase that. But your passion for the business absolutely is shining through, and it's absolutely incredible to listen to be honest with you. When did you come back? How many years did you... Because you was off for quite a while, wasn't you?
About 5 years, I think it was.
Yeah, I remember it being quite a long time, and I was champ. When you came back, I really tried to get a match with you again, because I know we did a couple of matches, and I was really trying to get you on a few of the shows, but unfortunately it never happened, unfortunately. Right, so you have got a wrestling school now, Danny, and I think if anybody needs any convincing, they just need to listen back to the previous 50 minutes of why they should come to your wrestling school.
Yeah.
The
strange thing is, it's easy for me to sum up, why I set up a school. To be perfectly honest, it's not about the money, Steve. I'm not really bothered about money. I'm not materialistic in the slightest. I just want to help the guys. There isn't that pure breed of wrestler coming through now, and I'm probably one of the last guys that came through from the old school, if you like, that's still wrestling. And for me, I just feel that I have to pass that on, If not for me, then for the great pros that did it for me, And there's still so much following for the British wrestling scene. And people say, it's old school or it's new school. It's neither. That's bullshit. The stuff I learned is wrestling. It's not old. Yeah. It's not new. It's none of those things. It is the only way to learn wrestling. Whether you think it's not or it is, I'm telling you, it is. And even if you're a young kid today and you want to do all that high flying and flying about, great, I'll teach you that stuff. But what you have to know is when you're doing all that high flying and all that dangerous stuff, at some point you got to land. So it's important you learn the basics, And we're seeing a lot of guys getting injured in the UK, particularly now. I don't know about abroad, but we're seeing a lot of serious injuries going through. And for me, it's only a matter of time. And God forbid that somebody gets killed in the ring, because the guys don't have that basics training. It's like anything else in life. You have to start at the beginning. And that's all our business is, and it's all it ever was. That's where you started. You started at the beginning and you were taught properly, And that's exactly what I want to do with these guys. And it's not just about teaching them, taking their money, chewing them out, wrestling factory, mass produce them. It's nothing to do with that. It's about teaching them the business, helping them get work, telling them what promoters want. I've already got, I think, almost a dozen promoters that are ready to take trainees from my school. So it's like the full life cycle, if you like. They come to the school, they learn the business, they learn it properly, correctly, and it's a fair thing to do, isn't it? If you want to learn something, learn it properly, because you know what? It feels great when you know something properly. And I try to say to guys, when you know something properly and you go in that ring and you do it, you have a confidence about you that other people don't have, And that's the difference, I think, now with the older pros. When you watch an old pro, he's confident in the ring, He's not in the slightest bit nervous. He knows exactly what he's doing. He can read his opponent. And it shows in their work and their ability. And that's something that is lacking, The young guys are nervous as hell before they go in.
And I think another thing that you could certainly do is develop people that are already wrestling, because the intricacies of how they do things are lacking now, and I think that is certainly something you could help with massively. So if there's anybody listening that is already wrestling, go along to Danny's school and let him show you the intricacies of what's happening. Because there's a lot of little things that are lacking nowadays that Danny will do that would have been automatic. I noticed what I call Big Daddy postings. How Big Daddy used to do his postings? Yeah. He'd just throw them halfway across the ring. Well, why have they just charged all the way across the ring? Yeah. People do that now because there's no realism anymore. Nobody wonders, why is that guy charged all the way across the ring? Yeah. It used to mean something, didn't it? Yeah, they used to throw him because he'd have run because the guy really threw him across the ring. Yeah. Now they don't care anymore because they're too busy thinking about what they're going to do after he's hit the corner pad, and that kind of thing is lacking nowadays. And I know that's exactly the kind of thing that you would be, picking them up on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope it's not a pride thing, I hope a lot of the guys that are in the business now are not thinking, I don't want to go there because I'm already wrestling and what will it make me look like. Forget all that bullshit. There's no punters there. There's no publicity. It's me and you and some other guys that want to learn too. There's nobody else there. And I get so frustrated because I see guys with great talent, who can really do some good stuff. And I watch them on purpose now when I go to shows. And I'm sat there thinking, yeah, you're good, but you know what? You could be fucking amazing if you just let me show you a few things. It's really, really frustrating because they've almost got it. They just need those little bits that make you that pro. And they really don't need a lot of tweaking. But, don't have that pride about you that stops your career being where it wants to be, Come to me, let me show you those things, and then go away. You know, even if you come for a little while, let me tweak those things, let me show you, and you'll suddenly say, Jesus, you're right. You know, I wish I'd have thought of that before. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So yeah, I agree with you. It's absolutely important. This isn't just for new guys starting out in the business. This is for guys that are already in the business that want to go that next step. Because I always say it's really hard to get noticed, particularly now in the business. And it's interesting, you spoke earlier, you know, about me and how I got started. And, you know, I was different then. I was a 16-year-old kid, and everybody else had been in the business a long time. So I was something a bit different, you know. Oh, who's that young boy? You know, he looks like a schoolboy. So I instantly had, you know, a head start because I was different. But the problem is today, nobody really stands out as being different. There are thousands of wrestlers that have just got boots, trunks, and good bodies, you know.
Yeah.
And I've screamed and screamed about it on my Facebook, you know. Looking good is really important, but it only helps you up until the time the bell goes. Once the bell goes, looking good ain't going to cut it. You know, looking good just ain't enough, mate. You got to be able to wrestle when the bell goes, and that's where I can help you. I absolutely agree. It's good to look muscle-bound, tanned. It's all about presentation, you know. But bottom line is, when the bell goes, you got to be able to wrestle. And I've wrestled hundreds, possibly thousands of people, Steve, that look like shit. But you know what? They're some of the best wrestlers I've ever been up against in my life, and I would much rather wrestle them than I would somebody who looks the part and can't wrestle.
How do people get in contact, Danny?
Simple, really. Jump on my Facebook page, search Danny Collins Wrestling School. All the details are there on how to book. You need to book soon, guys. I'm not just saying this. This isn't a publicity stunt. I only want to take so many guys. I do not want to turn up there and find there's 50 guys, 100 guys. I can't teach that many guys. I only want a limited number. That is absolutely straight. At this moment in time, we've only got 7 spaces left for April. We've also got bookings for May, June, and July. All the information is on my Facebook page, my email address. I'll shortly be getting a mobile phone that's specific to the training school so guys can get hold of me all the time. But yeah, in the first instance, jump on my Facebook page, Danny Boy Collins Wrestling School. Bingo, you're there.
We've got a few fan questions that have come in via the Twitter and Facebook pages. Question for Danny Collins. My question is, does anybody still bill you as boy?
Yeah, they do occasionally. Yeah, I don't have any problem with that.
I bet you don't. No,
not at all. It's one of those things, isn't it? It was the name I started with. It's the name people know me with, and yeah, that's the way life goes. I quite like it, to be honest with you.
Right, from Dougie then. During a televised match with Mike Bennett, the wrestling seemed to get out of hand for the duration of the contest. Was this a legitimate fight? If so, what was the background to it?
Yeah, it was a legitimate fight. I got my head kicked in that night. Absolutely smashed. Broke my nose, both my eyes blacked up, rough to bits. It was around the time when somebody had done some sort of stupid exposure or something or other. Something was going on, and I got my head kicked in, you know. And I think that it was a case of they put me in put me against somebody they knew I didn't have a lot of chance with. I was just a young kid. And it was with Mike Bennett, and he beat the living shit out of me. Yeah, it was absolutely straight, 100%. And I can remember them breaking into the football, in the middle of the football that was on before us, to say, make sure you don't miss the wrestling afterwards. We actually interrupted the football to say, don't forget the wrestling afterwards. It's a hell of a match. Yeah, I remember it well.
Okay, right. How old were you, Brent, at this point then?
17.
Right,
absolutely beat the shit out of me, Steve.
From Grain Greek John, and this is a question from me as well, because to me, Danny, you were always up there with Benoit, Guerrero, all these guys. How come you never ended up with those guys? WWF, America? Was it ever an option?
Yeah, it was years ago. I did get a call. I was very good friends with David Boy Smith, and years ago, it wasn't done like it is today with contracts and stuff, which is obviously a much better way of doing it. At the time, David Boy said, Vince is very keen for you to come out. Would you come out for us? And at the time, it just wasn't the right time for me, I was still learning the business, and I knew when you go for that sort of company, you get one shot to impress, and I was sensible enough to know that I wasn't ready at that point. And I said, no, and I said that. I said, I'm not ready yet, And but I'm ready now.
Yeah. To me, you were up there with all those guys, so you should have absolutely been there with them. So it's a surprise to me. Do you have any regrets anywhere?
No, none whatsoever, mate. No, I've absolutely loved my career, and you know what? I always consider myself really blessed. I really do. For me to have had, well, now I'm in my 31st year. For me to have had 31 years in this business and to be around the boys I've been around, meet the guys I've met, been the places I've been, I'm blessed. Absolutely blessed. I really am.
Brilliant. Finally, last thing, word association, Danny.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard this. I did this with Marty Jones. He had some colourful answers. I'm basically going to name 10 people. I need you to give me the first thing that comes into your head. If you think they're twats, you tell me they're twats, knobheads, whatever you may think. If you think they're lovely people, and a brief description of them. That's all I require.
Okay.
First thing that comes into your head. No, you know them.
I know them, okay.
Oh, you know them, believe me, yes. All right. First one. Kendo Nagasaki.
Prima donna.
Yes. Marty said the same thing with more colourful words.
Yeah, he was probably more accurate.
Marty Jones.
Lovely guy.
Lance Storm.
Yeah, again, absolutely so much respect for him. Perfect guy. Love him.
Brian Dixon.
Again, nothing bad to say about him, and I don't need to say that anymore because I'm not relying on him. But I have a lot of respect for Brian. He's gone bust twice, getting to where he is today. And finally, he's made a success of it. And to be honest, I give him more credit for that. Absolutely.
Giant Haystacks.
Man, you're asking me the easiest questions. Martin was just my best pal, in the business. I absolutely had a great time with him. I could tell you some great stories about me and Haystacks.
I would love to go on. I would love to hear a Haystack story.
We did a trip in Africa once. We were due to go out there for 6 weeks. Martin, as I call him, that's his name, Haystacks. He said to me, will you come out? Because I've got to do some publicity out there for 2 weeks before everybody else arrives. And I'm supposed to go on my own. I don't want to go on my own. So I said, yeah, I'll come with you. So we went out for 2 weeks on our own. And, oh, man, I just had the most amazing time. Memories that money just couldn't buy. Absolutely fantastic. Martin couldn't swim. And he used to trust me with some real personal stuff that I know about him, and I would never, ever reveal that to you or anybody. That stuff goes to my grave. But because he still has a living family, and I respect and love the guy. But one thing I will tell you, which is very funny, and I know his family won't mind because they know I absolutely love the guy. He couldn't swim, and it was really hot out there, 100 degrees, and we were both sweating like mad. And I said, Martin, why don't you come in the pool? No, I can't swim. Well, we were in a private place. We were looked after by Mercedes-Benz, a private pool. I said, look, Martin, come in on your own with me, and, you'll be all right. And he said, what happens if I go under the water? Will you save me? We weighed him in the day before. We went to a public weigh-in thing, and he was 55 stone. I said, Martin, I'm 12 stone. You're 55 fucking stone giant. What the fuck am I going to do if you slip under the water? What the fuck am I supposed to do? Catch you and carry you out? But when he got in, he absolutely loved it, and he stayed in there all day. Oh, man, the most amazing times I've had with Haystacks. Lovely, truly lovely guy.
He was, yeah. I only met him a few times, but he was always very, very pleasant.
You know what?
To me,
if you were his friend, he would lay down his life for you. That's the bloke he was.
Right, Finlay.
You're making my job really easy.
I am trying
for you. So much respect for the guy. He's like a brother to me. I actually spent more time, I think, on the road with Finlay than I did with my own family, And again, I know Finlay from a professional level, and I know him from a personal level. On both sides, I absolutely love about him, and I know all his family well. They're like my extended family. And last year, I got to work with Finlay and his son in a tag team. And his son, I used to bounce on my knee when he was 6 months old. Isn't that amazing how you go around a full circle like that? So I got to work with Finlay and his son.
Now you're getting to wrestle him.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. Robbie Brookside.
Yeah, again, legend. Love Robbie. Really good friends with him, his wife, his daughter. His daughter's to come into my training school. And obviously she goes to Brookside's training school. Brilliant guy. He's also got an incredibly good training school, and him and I are going to exchange students, and we have an understanding on how that's going to work. Great guy, and you know what? I'm made up for him where he is now in the WWE. I hear they've just extended his contract, and I'm chuffed for him. The guy absolutely has worked his ass off to get where he is. Fair play to him.
And finally, Max Crabtree.
Yeah, I never had any problem with Max. I'm not really giving you any answers, for real good shoots, am I? But The problem is, you've asked me about guys I really respect, and like I said earlier, Max was always really good for me. Never had any problems with him whatsoever. He did my career the world of good, and if I met the guy today, I'd shake his hand and say thank you.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I'm not looking for shoots as in to slate people. It's
Yeah.
I'm all for a respect thing.
Yeah.
I don't think the whole slagging people off kind of thing. It doesn't do it for me, to be honest
but
with you.
To be fair,
So.
if you'd give me a name of a real arsehole, I'd say to you he's a real arsehole. You happen to be the guys that I actually love and respect very much. Because the one thing we didn't touch on during our interview there was egos. And you know what? Egos is one thing I can't tolerate. I fucking hate egomaniacs. Absolutely hate them. There's no room in our job for egos. None whatsoever. And the other thing we didn't touch on was when people talk about legends. People talk about World of Sport legends, and I get messages on Facebook saying, "Oh my God, you're a legend. You're this, you're that." No, I'm not, mate. I'm somebody who's worked really hard at my career, and I've had some lucky breaks. For me, the real legends in life. People like NHS nurses that work 15 hours a day, get paid shit money, and save lives. Let's talk about legends and heroes. Let's get our priorities right. It's bizarre, isn't it? No ego whatsoever. See, this business honestly hasn't bent me in any way whatsoever.
No.
In actual fact, I'm doing work now for a charity for homeless. I've just been to see a homeless charity in Boston.
Yeah.
And I sat there having cups of tea with guys that have just come off the street, alcoholics, drug addicts, and I could speak to them eye to eye. I had as much good time with them, and I could relate as much to them as I could with some of the top pros I work with. And you know what?
Yeah.
I give that credit to me and the old guys that taught me that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I know where my feet are planted, and we're nothing special, mate, are we, at the end of the day?